Reports in the northwest.
Very warm welcome to a shorter Granada Reports because of the football. First, there's anger tonight over a decision to turn down what was known as Hillsborough law, a law to make sure bereaved families get funding for inquests in the same way the police do. Families of some of those who died in the disaster say politicians are already forgetting the lessons of the past. At the same time, it's also emerged South Yorkshire Police spent more than £2 million representing its suspended chief constable at the inquest. Funding, the families say, is a disgrace. This report from Rachel Townsend.
Bereaved families are all too frequently thrown into courtrooms raw with grief to face adversarial questioning from highly paid QCs hired by the police and other public bodies.
An impassioned call from the Shadow Home Secretary for a change in the law, so families of the dead receive the same legal funding as police in cases involving officers. But last night, MPs voted against the proposal. Hours later, it emerged that the South Yorkshire Force spent over £2 million on lawyers for the suspended Chief Constable David Crompton and other officers.
It's impossible to justify, isn't it? Because public money should pay to get to the truth. It shouldn't be paid to protect backs in the public sector.
Margaret Aspinall was in Parliament to witness MPs turn down the amendment. Her son James was one of 96 unlawfully killed at Hillsborough.
It's sickening. The police were funded for throwing the same stories up to the families. It's already been discredited. It's morally wrong.
David Crompton was one of 9 former police officers entitled to legal representation paid for by the taxpayer. Yet he himself is now under scrutiny. Immediately after the Hillsborough inquest concluded, David Crompton offered an unreserved apology for failing the victims. Yet throughout the proceeding, it's claimed that he instructed his legal team to pour the blame onto Liverpool fans. Well, South Yorkshire Police refused our offer of an interview today, but the police watchdog confirmed they're investigating complaints into Mr. Crompton's conduct. He was suspended a day after the Hillsborough jury reached their conclusions. Dismissal proceedings are now underway. As for a Hillsborough law, Andy Burnham says he will not give up and will now take his fight to the House of Lords. Rachel Townsend, ITV News, Liverpool.
In other news tonight, a gang of 13 have been jailed for bringing fear and misery to parts of Cheshire and Merseyside. One of them was given 2 life sentences for firearms offences. Police released footage of them riding dangerously on the roads. At Liverpool Crown Court, 12 men and 1 woman were sentenced to a total of 110 years for crimes involving firearms and drugs. Police say the gang believed they were above the law and untouchable. A number of homes have had to be evacuated after a huge fire at a mill near Oldham. Roads have had to be closed around Bailey Mill, a 3-storey derelict building in Delph. Greater Manchester Fire Service says its crews are dealing with the fire from outside the building due to structural concerns about it. Well, next to our second report this week, marking 20 years since the IRA bomb in the centre of Manchester. Today, our correspondent Mel Barham looks at how the city lost no time starting the rebuilding work.
The city centre was like a war zone. I don't think anything quite prepared you for the scale of the devastation. Privately, we all thought, will anyone come back to the city centre again?
They were very dark days. I mean, the place was a building site. I wouldn't have been able to think of this future that I see now.
The largest bomb to explode on mainland Britain left Manchester broken. Iconic buildings and livelihoods shattered. The bomb struck the very heart of the city. A third of its retail space left devastated, more than 700 businesses affected. But terror didn't paralyse this city, it galvanised it. Almost immediately the decision was taken not simply to rebuild, but to redesign and regenerate. Within days, the then Deputy Prime Minister Michael Heseltine had hurried up to Manchester. His idea was to launch an international design competition, but he knew it was controversial.
The leadership of the city was Labour, and here was I, the Conservative minister. Could I tell them what I thought should happen? Would they listen? Anyway, I met Richard Leese, the leader. I said what I thought with apprehension, expecting him to say, well, no, we'll do it, and all that. He said, that's why I agree. That's what we'll do. And that's what we did.
It would become the most ambitious urban facelift since the Second World War.
The scale of the destruction allowed us to almost have a blank sheet of paper of that part of the city centre. And within a month, we got the show on the road and got the city to believe that some good will come out of this terrible event.
2 days after the bomb, Marks & Spencer announced they'd built their largest UK store here, but the task ahead was huge. Some buildings had to be pulled down, and at its height, 6,500 construction workers were employed. One of the buildings severely damaged was the Royal Exchange Theatre.
A lot of the blast had gone up to the domes and actually lifted the two up a few feet.
The rebuild took 2.5 years.
The really positive things about it were that a lot of people in the city rallied around and offered us help, and we had a touring module, and we based ourselves in Campfield Market for the next 18 months.
One of the biggest challenges was creating this new walkway linking St Anne's Square with the cathedral, but it meant these two listed pubs, which at the time were slap bang in the middle, had to be moved piece by piece and then put back together again like a complicated jigsaw puzzle.
20 years ago, this part of town was very grim, lots of buses and cars, whereas today, lots of public squares.
Ewan Kelly wrote a book about the rebuild.
It unlocked this part of the city centre because it brought the landowners together, it brought the council together with those landowners to look at response because they had to. It's injected life into a very important part of the city centre.
Most of the rebuilding work was completed by the end of 1999 at a cost of 1.2 billion. Some have joked that the bomb was the best thing to happen to Manchester, a sentiment not shared by all.
I've said every day for 20 years, no, and no again. It was not the best thing that happened to the city. But what Manchester did was make the best of it.
Over the last 2 decades, this city has gone from bomb to boom, and 20 years on, it's still refusing to stand still. Mel Barham, ITV News, Manchester.
Some political news. The Chancellor, George Osborne, says the Northern powerhouse is on the ballot paper in the EU referendum. The Tatton MP warns there'll be a big question mark over major transport plans if Britain votes to leave. But the Leave campaigners argue quitting the EU would mean more money for the Northern powerhouse, not less. The Chancellor has been speaking to our political correspondent Daniel Hewitt about why he believes voting to stay in Europe would be better for the North West.
Well, look, there's a bright future for the north of England, for the Northern Powerhouse, if we remain in the EU and continue to attract the kind of business and investment that you see on display here in Liverpool. But if we quit the EU, then all of that will be in doubt. We know the country is likely to go into a recession. Well, recessions often hit the north first and hit the north for longer. So I think the Northern Powerhouse will be badly damaged.
When you make such a stark warning that the Northern Powerhouse is essentially under threat if we leave the EU, I think you have to qualify that by saying exactly what you mean by that. Are we talking here about HS3 link being in jeopardy? Are we talking about the expansion of the MCT2?
First of all, there'll be fewer jobs here in the north of England. 120,000 jobs at risk now. That will be a real blow to the economic security of many families. Houses and pensions will be hit as well. Second, we're surrounded by great universities here and science facilities in Liverpool. A lot of European money comes in to support the scientists who work here. Third, our country is poorer. We won't be able to afford as many things because our economy is smaller. And so a lot of those big transport projects will have question marks over them.
There is obviously a huge question over whether you will even be the Chancellor. I know it is your job to warn voters of potential pitfalls, warn voters of what may happen if we leave. But consistently talking about the economy in such grave terms, you cannot carry on as Chancellor, surely, if we leave on the 23rd of June.
First of all, I'm really optimistic about this country's future. I'm here at this International Festival of Business.
It doesn't sound like it if we leave the European Union.
I'm not optimistic about Britain's prospects.
And therefore, could you carry on as Chancellor?
No, let me come on to that. This is not about one politician. This is about a decision we're going to live with for decades. And that is why you've got the Labour Mayor of Liverpool, the leader of Manchester City Council from the Labour Party, myself, who often don't agree on many things, coming together for this reason to say, let's vote to remain.
You're also the Chancellor that has taken an unprecedented level of money off local councils. Austerity in this region has hit the poorest the hardest, and you're asking voters to trust your vision in areas where they have been hit the hardest by your policies.
Look, even if you don't want to listen to a Conservative Chancellor, listen to the Labour Mayor of Liverpool, listen to the Labour leader of Manchester Council. Whether you're Labour or Conservative, the best for the north of England is the northern powerhouse growing inside the EU, not putting everything at risk by quitting the EU.
And we'll be hearing from some of the main campaigners in the Leave campaign, of course, over the next few days. In sport, Everton have confirmed Ronald Koeman as their new manager. He signed a 3-year deal after the Blues paid Southampton £5 million to release him. He says he hopes to bring the glory days back to the club.
We're speaking about Everton and the history is a big one, and we try to do everything, and we try to reach what they did in the past. That's difficult, but I think with all the people really involved and the nice people in Everton and the fans, then everything is possible.
And we'll hear more from him in our late bulletin tonight. Now let's get the weather from Kerrie.
The forecast is sunshine. Thomas Cook Algarve Holidays sponsor the ITV Granada weather.
Hello, good evening. Great shots of the mist rolling back into the Isle of Man yesterday evening, but the Isle of Man certainly by day getting the best of any drier and brighter weather over the coming few days. The messy story continues. We still have Met Office weather warnings for the risk of localised thundery showers, heavy downpours, the risk of localised flooding and dangerous driving conditions. But by Friday, hopefully settling down a little bit for the start of the weekend. So for this evening, those showers still continuing but easing off. More localised to parts of Cheshire and the High Peak overnight tonight. Elsewhere, dry with clear spells. Mist and murk over high ground, mild with light winds. Their eastern times for tomorrow, setting at 9:43. And for tomorrow, west best for sunshine in the morning. But as we get the sunny spells into the afternoon, also the risk of those heavy, slow-moving, thundery showers.
Thomas Cook Algarve Holidays sponsor the ITV Granada weather. Keeping a close eye on summer. The pollen count, sponsored by Allergy Eye Drops.
Well, pollen counts, grass pollen counts, will be moderate to high in any of the drier and brighter slots over the next few days, but of course much lower where we get the showery outbreaks. So we're going for moderate Wednesday, Thursday, back up to high for Friday.
Thanks, Kerrie, and that is it from Granada Reports. We're later and shorter, as I said earlier, because of the football. Sorry about that. You can always follow breaking news and updates from us, though, on our website. That's at itv.com/Granada. And there's more in our next bulletin coming your way at 10:30. For now, have a great night. Bye-bye.